A man stands on the banks of the Bosphorus, gazing into the depths of its flowing waters, as if searching for answers hidden in the currents. The past echoes through him, whispering stories of ambition, conquest, and the relentless march of time. He had once heard of a great emperor of the Romans, a lawgiver, a conqueror, a defender of the faith, a builder of temples to exalt both himself and his God. A man who had taken a courtesan as his wife and ruled alongside her in a reign that was both glorious and controversial. An emperor who had dreamed of an empire stretching beyond the furthest horizons, one that would stand as an eternal testament to his power and vision. Was he, Suleiman, not all of these things as well? And yet, where was that dreamer's empire now? Beneath his feet, he stood in the beloved city of that emperor, the city that had once been the heart of Byzantium, the city that had fallen to the Ottomans, whose great cathedral had been transformed into his mosque. The thought unsettled him. If the mighty Byzantine Empire had crumbled into the annals of history, would his own empire, the mighty Ottoman state, one day suffer the same fate? Would it become a mere shadow of its former self, a relic told in stories and remembered only in the stones of its once great monuments? The weight of these questions pressed upon him, making his mind restless, his nights sleepless. More than ever, he longed for the counsel of his old friend Ibrahim. Standing on the shores of the Bosphorus, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the day the swift rider arrived, the man on the tall horse who had come to Manisa to deliver the news he had long anticipated, but still felt unprepared to receive. His father was dead. He had imagined this moment countless times, and yet, now that it was upon him, he did not know how to feel. His father had been Selim the Stern, capable, ruthless, a man who inspired both awe and terror, a ruler who executed without hesitation, making his court tread carefully, for the slightest misstep could mean death. But he had also been a boon to the empire, expanding its borders farther than any Ottoman ruler before him. In the reckoning of the West, it was the year 1520, but to Suleiman, it was the year 925. He was 25 years old, born in 900, and he was about to ascend as the 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. He had been born at the dawn of the 10th century, a sign many considered auspicious. At that moment, he had called for Ibrahim, his closest companion since childhood, a Greek, a Christian by birth, a man who had entered his service as a slave and risen to become his confidant. Together, they had taken the fastest horses and ridden for Istanbul. His father's death was a secret, carefully guarded to prevent rebellion in the absence of a ruling sultan. For 8 days, they rode hard through the dusty roads of Anatolia, and for 8 days, he had time to think. There was at least one consolation. There would be no civil war. His father had ensured that by executing all of his brothers. A bloody act, but one that spared the empire from the usual succession disputes that plagued Ottoman history. His reign would begin in peace. He and Ibrahim had discussed how they would establish his rule, how they would navigate the treacherous waters of the Byzantine court in Istanbul. Upon their arrival in the sublime port, Suleiman had barely dismounted when he was surrounded by guards and functionaries, all eager to confirm their new master's authority. He had been led directly to the tomb of Ayub, the resting place of the prophet's standard-bearer, one of the most sacred sites in all of Istanbul. There, the Mevlevi Sharif had approached him and girded him with the golden sword of Osman, tying him both to the prophet and the founder of the Ottoman house. With that act, he was made sultan. The next day, as the sun rose over the city, the highest officials of the empire came to pay him homage. He followed his father's bier to its final resting place and, as his first decree as sultan, ordered that a mosque be built around Selim's grave. It was a tribute to his father, a declaration of the strength of the house of Osman. But he also wanted to show that he was not merely his father's son. He would rule differently. The fear that had hung over the empire under Selim would not persist. He granted a generous donative to the Janissary Corps, ensuring their loyalty. But he did not forget the other ranks of power. He rewarded officials and bureaucrats as well, reversing unpopular policies such as the ban on Iranian trade goods. He would make it clear this was a new era. Yet, as he had planned with Ibrahim, mercy should never be mistaken for weakness. A few executions followed, not many, but enough to remind the court that the House of Osman was still ruled by a tiger, not a lamb. And soon his rule was tested. Hardly had he taken the sword before rebellion broke out in Syria. The governor of Syria had risen in defiance, believing he had the support of Egypt's Bey. But the Bey of Egypt was a cunning man, and instead of openly siding with the rebellion, he secretly informed the Sultan while waiting to support whoever emerged victorious. Suleiman saw in this not just a threat, but an opportunity. He gathered his armies and marched south with overwhelming force, crushing the rebellion and proving to the Islamic world that he was not to be challenged. He would be merciful to the loyal but merciless to the disloyal. Perhaps, in hindsight, this was where it all began. He shook his head and continued walking along the shore. But a smile touched his lips as he recalled those early days of planning with Ibrahim. With the South secured, he could turn his gaze to his true ambition, Europe. Long into the night, he and Ibrahim would study maps, analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of European powers. Two locations always dominated their discussions: Belgrade and Rhodes. The Kingdom of Hungary stood as the last great bulwark against Ottoman expansion into Europe, and Belgrade was the key to breaching that barrier. It was a city of humiliation for the Ottomans, a failed conquest in 1456 that Europe still celebrated, ringing church bells at noon in memory of the Christian victory. Suleiman would erase that shame. But another obstacle loomed in the east, the island of Rhodes. The Knights of St. John controlled it, using it as a base for Christian corsairs who harassed Ottoman ships and disrupted trade. His father had tried to take the island and failed. Other sultans before him had tried and failed. But where they had failed, he must succeed. Before he could act, war found him first. Hungary, long at peace with the empire under the condition of tribute, refused to send the annual payment. Worse still, the Hungarian prince executed the Ottoman envoy. The insult was too great to bear. He had shown his court that he was a different ruler, but now the world would see his wrath. The banners of war were raised. No one insulted the dignity of the Sultan. No one defied the empire. As he looked at the waves, he remembered the thrill that had come with his anger. He had not just been enraged, he had been eager. War was coming, and it would shape the world.